Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Gail Carson, bringing you Living Regret-Free, the show that gives you skills and techniques to achieve a regret-free life. Don't live a life of stress and negativity when you could be experiencing a life of joy, happiness, and reward. Our guests all have valuable tips to make your life a better one. My guest today is Paul Oster. Paul is referred to as the nation's credit repairman. He is CEO of Better Qualified, which is a nationwide credit repair company. More importantly, he is a cybersecurity expert who regularly appears on Fox Business, CBS, NBC, ABC, and elsewhere. Paul says it's scary but true. Hackers, if they're so inclined, can find ways into your home you may not have even thought about. And high-tech internet-connected appliances and electronics are one way in. In one high-profile cyber attack that took place in late 2013 and early 2014, hackers broke into 100,000 consumer gadgets, including a refrigerator, television, wireless speakers, and media centers, and used the appliances to release some almost 1 million malicious emails. And that's why we have Paul with us today. So welcome, Paul.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Doctor.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, this is all about living regret-free, and I thought by having someone like you on, it might help alleviate some fears and worries that some people have about their privacy and their information. And you talk about a lot of different things, including credit scores and so forth. So let's talk about, first of all, how prevalent ID theft is and what you should do to prevent it, because I think a lot of people are concerned. I know that when my own daughter didn't get her income tax refund on time, she said, "Oh, ID theft, ID theft." And I said, "No." I said, it's something totally different. So how do you prevent it? What is it? And all of that.
Well, identity theft is and is going to continue to be the fastest growing crime because this is the age of the Internet. You mentioned 2013 with the smart appliances. 2014 was the year of the data breach. It just seemed that every other day or certainly a couple of times a week, there was another data breach. And the problem with that is people became numb to the data breach. When it first started happening, people were tuning into it, interested and saying, what do I do? Then they started to say, well, wait a second. I shopped at Target, nothing happened. I banked at Chase, nothing happened. I shopped here. But the problem with that is, sooner than later, if you don't change your PINs and passwords, if you don't take some very basic steps to lower the risk of the identity theft, you become the easy target. And I use the analogy of, if you remember, back in the days, you had criminals that would walk through parking lots, and they would just simply tug on the door handles. And when they found one that wasn't locked, well, that's the car that they got into, and they either stole it or emptied the contents. So if you don't do something to at least, lock down your information, you're going to be the one, when they sell your information on the black market through what's called the dark web, you're going to be the one that becomes a victim. So you have to take some basic steps to protect that information.
Well, that's interesting. I have enough trouble thinking of my passwords and remembering them now, and I carry a little book with me that has all the various passwords in them, and I don't know how anybody remembers all of their various passwords, but you're saying that is something we need to do, right?
Oh, you need to do it, and you need to do it on a regular basis, because what happens is, and again, if you go back to the smart appliances, people would say, well, who cares if a hacker, breaks into my refrigerator? Well, the problem is that most people, even if they create a very strong password, they use the same password for the refrigerator as they do for their online banking, as they do for their 401ks. And so once they have the password and an email address, now they start to put the pieces of the puzzle together. So most often, the identity theft isn't just something that happens one time. They're going in, using social media, they're getting your address, your date of birth, your mother's maiden name is on Facebook, and, then they get your email and your passwords, and once they have enough of that information, boy, they can backtrack into all of our personal information.
So what is your suggestion in terms of how often to change passwords? What do you suggest?
Well, this is where I become the most unpopular guy in the room because if you're not doing it on a regular basis, and by regular I mean at least every 30 days, again, you're leaving yourself out there. You're much more vulnerable to becoming a victim. Let's face it, we're between 2013, 2014, and already in 2015, all of our information has been compromised. All of our information is in 10 billion different databases. So again, it's only a matter of when, really not if, we become a victim. And again, if you're not changing your pins and passwords, if they're not strong, then you are ultimately going to become a victim. And people say, well, Paul, it's tough to remember them. And Paul, if I change the pins and passwords, it's inconvenient, all of that stuff. But if you've ever spoken to somebody who's been a victim of identity theft, that is far, far more inconvenient. You could talk, you're talking about up to 2 years of trying to, fix the situation that has been caused by the identity theft. So take a little time, get into a routine where you're changing those pins and passwords, because that's really all we can do. I'm the first person to say there's really no such thing as identity theft protection because they have our information, and if they want to use it, they're going to use it. So it's really about early detection also. And I say this with a grain of salt because, we live in this world now, in today's world, we really need to be involved in a credit monitoring program. And, if you use one of the free ones, I hate to say you kind of get what you pay for, but you get what you pay for. So you're going to wind up having to spend, somewhere around $10 a month. I don't think you should get crazy and spend $20, $25 a month. You don't need all of those crazy bells and whistles. But what you need is a system that is going to alert you if someone tries to use your information that is inconsistent to what's on file.
That brings me to the question of what do you do if you have had your identity stolen? I mean, you hear horror stories. So what are the steps that you need to take?
Well, you need to be very, very proactive. And again, unfortunately, if you're not involved with a professional service that specializes in that, and it's really the resolution. So lots of different, sometimes credit card companies now offer credit monitoring, and they're going to alert you that somebody may have used your information. But what do you do if that actually happened? So if you don't have a system of the resolution services, it can take you up to 2 years or longer, and you live the nightmare that you spoke about because it's very hard. They're probably not going to catch the person who perpetrated the crime. And then it just becomes very difficult. People say, Paul, well, if it wasn't me and someone else used my ID and someone else, set up an account or used a credit card, wouldn't it be easy to get that stuff taken care of and taken off of the credit report? And I shouldn't be responsible. And I'm telling you that it sounds like it should be that easy, but it's really not. And that's why some people spend up to 2 years trying to fix the mess. So if you get a red flag, then here's some of the red flags that you should be aware of. If you get something in the mail, obviously an acceptance or a denial letter that you've never applied for a credit card, or an account that has a different name but your address, those are the red flags. If you look at your credit report and there's addresses on your credit report that you've never been associated with, that's a red flag. Because what the identity thieves do is they start to establish addresses that are associated with your name and your social security number, so it doesn't raise a red flag when they actually open an account. So we need to be diligent about monitoring our own credit, paying attention to our accounts. Sometimes they're going in there and they're taking pennies, 10 cents, 50 cents, $1.57 out of the account just to see if someone's actually watching. And if you're not monitoring your accounts and balancing, your checkings and savings and retirement accounts, if you're not really looking at that stuff, boy, after they, test the waters, they can drain your account in seconds. So you just need to be aware of your own information and accounts. Because the government can't protect us. They can't even protect themselves. When you have...
But don't they say that every time you request And I don't know this, so you're a good one to ask this question of. They say every time you request your credit report that your score goes down.
Well, that's true and not true. So there's two different types of inquiries. There are hard inquiries where actually you're requesting a credit report because you're applying for some line of credit. The other inquiry is a soft inquiry or a consumer inquiry where you just want to look at your information. And you can pull your credit report through annualcreditreport.com. That's the FTC's website that gives us all one free look a year. And if you wanted to pull it more than that, you could certainly pay for it. But you could pull your consumer credit report every day if you really wanted to. That's a little crazy, but you could, and it wouldn't have any negative effect on your credit scores.
And where do you go for that?
You can go to annualcreditreport.com, not free credit report. Go ahead.
Okay, so you do go to annualcreditreport.com, and that's where you can get your consumer report.
That's right, and that's not going to have any negative impact from the inquiry on your credit scores at all.
Interesting. Okay, well, that's good to know, and that's good for our listeners to know. So the other thing that you talk about is that it's important to have a good credit score. Is that correct?
Oh, well, in today's world, we live in a credit-driven world, and basically, unfortunately, anybody who's below a 700, and it's not easy to maintain a 700 credit score. If you're below a 700, you're going to pay what's called risk-based premiums for things like insurance. Most people don't understand your property and casualty insurance, your homeowners, or your automobile insurance, disability insurance. All of those things are directly tied to your credit score. And it's state by state, but some states, the premium is up to 90% higher for somebody that has a poor credit score for the same exact coverage. You think about that, 90% higher because their credit score is low. And people say, well, Paul, what does credit have to do with insurance? Well, they prove through numerous tests and surveys that there is a correlation between credit and homeowners insurance and car insurance. So to give you an example, someone has a 600 credit score and they apply for auto insurance. Well, what the auto insurance industry says is that this person with 600 credit scores is X amount of times more likely to get into an accident or X amount of more likely to have their car stolen. It just shows a pattern of, let's say, irresponsibility. So people need to pay attention to their scores because it could wind up costing them a couple of $100 a month. If you're talking about a mortgage, again, auto insurance, homeowners insurance, credit cards, those things add up very, very quickly. And your credit score could wind up costing you a couple of $100 a month.
But, with the problem that everybody, well, that's a big word, everybody, but many people had in 2008, there were a lot of things that happened to people then. And not necessarily because of their own problems, just because of what happened in the economy. A lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of the homes lost their value. So what do you do in something like that when really it was not within your realm to be able to do anything about that?
Well, here's the good news. I think the biggest myth surrounding credit scores, and what do you do if you have a situation where you default on a loan or a line of credit and you have collections or judgments. It doesn't take 7 years to fix your credit. The items may stay on your report for up to 7 years. They don't have to. There's been, thousands, hundreds of thousands of items that have been deleted from people's credit reports. But the idea is to move forward and rebound, you have to establish positive trade lines. You have to open up accounts and use them responsibly. If you use a credit card, what most people don't understand is it's called your utilization ratio. And that's the difference between your credit limits and the balances on those credit cards. And you need to keep it below 30%. Most people think if I keep it around 50%, it's okay. But it's not okay in the eyes of the FICO scoring model, the Fair Isaac Corporation. That's who comes up with our credit scores. They say if you're above 30%, they're going to lower your score. If you go 50, 60, 70%, they're going to lower your score. If you go over your credit limit by $1 on a credit card account, that could drop your score 100 points.